and have a motion to approve last month's minutes.
Anybody?
Shall I make a motion to approve last month's minutes?
John will second.
Thank you, John. Okay, the agenda today is to review the route recommendation. We're going to do kind of a short presentation and then leave a bunch of time for discussion for this committee. I think Felicia and I took a little time talking earlier last week. It's only Tuesday, and really wanting to start to put together kind of what this committee wants to translate up to the CMC, both this month and when we close the comment period in May, and then have kind of the June meeting, which would be the next step. Also just want to give folks kind of an update on where we've been with the anti-displacement working group and where they kind of are right now, because I know everybody's very interested in that work as well. And that's kind of the meeting today. So I will start sharing my screen. Sorry, I gotta get reset up. Often I do all of this before you all log in, so I don't have to fiddle around, but we're chatting with folks. I need to get the chat back up, so if you ask questions, and see. Okay. So going to a little bit of the overview of the project and kind of where we've been to get to this recommendation that came out this morning. And I think everybody's kind of familiar with this graphic. And screen sharing okay? Everything sound good? Everything look good? Okay. So, we've known that Brooklyn Park, the northern part of Brooklyn Park is basically staying the same. We've had this middle section in Crystal and Robbinsdale that we've been exploring a lot. And then the big decision has been whether it's Lowry or West Broadway in Minneapolis. And to kind of get to those routes, just kind of a reminder of where we've all been this last 18 months, and you all have been with us through this process. It was that process to actually pivot the project that started in August of 2020. And then we spent a good portion of that year, which was also during kind of the height of the pandemic, doing things like setting project principles and goals, and kind of the basis of which we would want to look at routes. In March of 2021, that was the first time we put options out onto the street, and we asked if we were missing anything. What else should we be evaluating? And got that feedback. Some of you helped us refine that and look at additional options. And then we started to place stations and think about connections and getting more into that engineering, basic engineering work of how things fit. All of that work and engagement and information that we shared with the community led us to the point where we released the draft route modification report. And that did not include a recommendation. And that was so that all of you could basically help us, kind of check us. Was our analysis considering all the things that were important to the community? Were we missing things? And then yesterday rather, coming out with a recommendation itself for a 30-day comment period. Kind of what I already said, but in timeframes specifically, which is, we had all these phases of engagement and they kind of built upon each other. And all of that resulted in about 300 meetings with folks, we had social media and paid advertisements, multiple rounds of survey, the interactive map, which many of you engaged on, comment forms, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's always important to note that even with all this engagement, there's a lot more engagement that we can do. We have actually 2 new outreach coordinators on the call with us today that I think many of you have already met, Panu Vu and Kirsten Yeager, who will really be a resource going into the future. The community engagement cohort has also been super essential to the work that we've done throughout this process. Some of, I think, our most best events have been hosted by the cohort and the connections that the cohort brought. So that'll also continue to be a model for us as we move forward, is continuing to contract with community and cultural organizations to reach into their networks, into community, and to continue to get feedback. So while we're at a route recommendation, which I know some of you are happy about and some of you are not happy about, in the process, that is a commitment that we have with the community to continue. We also have all of you and the advisory committee process, and I was also talking to Felicia about how the virtual world has made this committee very hard. In some ways, we haven't had the conversation's different virtually. And so one of the last agenda items that we have will be kind of, do we want some of our last meetings of this body to continue to be virtual, or to do a couple in person? And then once the route is adopted, the charter of the committee, we've selected the route, and so we'll do reappointments to basically continue this process. But we will always have a BAC as we're developing this process, the same with the CAC, CMC, et cetera. And you have your city technical staff that also help us kind of vet things through the process. Doesn't mean everything 100% is agreed upon, but it's that process of making the project better, pulling in all the things that we need to understand, and kind of getting it all together, setting priorities, dealing with issues, all that kind of stuff. We reviewed that last time, but we did get close to 500 comments on the draft report. A lot of it was similar themes that we've heard throughout the year. We all kind of talked about that. And that's all the basis that kind of went into this document that we just released. So I know you all know this, right? You were with us through that process, but because we're at this point, I think it, both in terms of our route development and also our anti-displacement work, it's really wanted to highlight the journey that we've been on to get to this point. So I will turn it over to my colleagues to kind of overview just the recommendation itself and a little bit of the analysis and what's new, an example of what's new as well.
Well, thanks, Sophia. Good morning, everybody. Dan Solar, Hennepin County. Here this morning to talk a little bit about the route modification report. So the report was officially issued yesterday, and it is the summary of the work that was done. I think most of you are well aware. We had a draft. I got several of them here on my desk, but we had the draft route modification report that we put out and received a lot of feedback on that. And we specifically, at the time we sent out the draft, sent it out without a firm recommendation about a route, but just background information in order to gather feedback. And that's resulted now in us putting together this final route modification report, with the big piece of that, the big summary, being this next slide, which shows the route that we as staff are recommending move forward through the process for extending the blue line from Target Field Station up through the northwest communities here in Hennepin County, up to Target Field Station. So similar to where we've always been, this is an extension of the blue line. So it's starting down at Target Field Station. And because we've chosen to move, or we're recommending that the line come up West Broadway, when we leave downtown, you see a little triangle down at the bottom of the map there. There's a couple choices for how we get out of downtown. One of them, in either case, LRT will have to come down from Target Field Station down at grade near the 7th Street and 6th Avenue intersection. Southwest stays up in the air. They're building that bridge right now for Southwest to come up and turn over 7th Street and head up Royalston. And so the Blue Line extension design will come down at grade at 7th Street and 6th Avenue and do one of two things that we'll still work out in design. It'll either head up 7th Street and then on a bridge over I-94, or it will head west on 6th Avenue, Olson Memorial Highway, make a turn on East Lyndale, and then head on a bridge over I-94. So in either case, we're coming out of downtown on a bridge over 94 and landing in and about the Plymouth and Lyndale intersection. And that's where our first station will be. One thing you'll notice about this map is, except for the North Brooklyn Park sections, all of the stations are station study areas still, because we don't have exact locations or exact configurations for those stations. We have general locations, but we still need to work through the design process and environmental mitigation process resulting in those stations. So they're essentially station study areas. So the line would move north-south along Lyndale Avenue between Plymouth and West Broadway. And then you'll see another spot where you see a couple of lines. As I know many of you have seen in the past, the West Broadway segment from essentially Lyndale to Irving, which is maybe 5 or 6 blocks, will be some combination of LRT on West Broadway, LRT on 21st, LRT split between West Broadway and 21st, roadway split between West Broadway and 21st. We have several options in that area that would also include an Emerson Fremont station area in that segment. So that segment has a lot of work, and it will be a big focus of work going forward in 2022, is just what the configuration in that segment will be. Essentially, then our recommendation is to follow West Broadway up to the Robbinsdale, Minneapolis border with a station around Penn Avenue. Somewhere in the Penn Avenue intersection area would be a next station. And then to transfer from West Broadway to Highway 81, County Road 81, right at the Robbinsdale border. So we've got a number of options for that, but the one that fits best for what we've worked out with North Memorial would be to bring from the center of West Broadway, come to the west in the air, bring LRT in the air, and have a station right near the kind of corner, I guess what would be the southeast corner of North Memorial complex there, with an elevated station and a connection to the hospital, and then bring LRT back down just north of Abbott. We would propose to run LRT in, on, or over Highway 81 through downtown Robbinsdale, over Highway 100, and up in Crystal through stations in downtown Robbinsdale, Bass Lake Road, and 63rd. So a lot of work to do there just on how that's configured, where those stations will go. For example, in Crystal, we're looking at an at-grade option for an intersection. We're looking at an interchange option, which would bring County Road 81 traffic over Bass Lake Road with a station area there too. So that piece, all while everything south of the Brooklyn Boulevard station is essentially has a concept of where the route will go. Still a lot of design details to work out about what happens there. The design details are fairly set in place from Brooklyn Boulevard station to the north. We would continue the design we always proposed with center running LRT on West Broadway with a reconstructed West Broadway and stations at Brooklyn Boulevard, 85th Avenue, 93rd Avenue, Oak Grove Parkway. Still a park and ride at Oak Grove Parkway in the north, still an operations and maintenance facility on the north end. And so this is now in our recommendation, the route that we're recommending for this Blue Line extension project. And so it takes us now into the environmental phase. So why did we can go back to that previous map. So why did we do all of this? Well, everybody knows that the purpose of this was that the yellow that you see on here, which is the former route north-south from Highway 55 along the BNSF corridor, was not available. We were unable to make any headway with the railroad. And so our project principles and goals were, let's try to stay as close to the previous alignment as possible while still not using any railroad right away. We set forth some project principles that we believe we have met. And down here on the south end, we spent this greater part of the last year really evaluating West Broadway in Minneapolis versus Lowry as a route. And one of the difficulties we had there is that we didn't have one really good route and one really, really bad route. They both would have worked. They both had their pros. They each have some of their cons as well. But in the end, both based on our public feedback that we had received, as well as our engineering and land use and all of the other attributes that we looked at, we just believe the West Broadway route serves more people, provides more positive impact to the community in terms of putting LRT and an LRT line where it's needed to serve the most both customer base as well as potential for economic redevelopment as well. And so that is what led us to move forward with the West Broadway route. So the report did some scoring, and of course you've all seen this before. It rated poor, good, and excellent on our various goals for each of the routes. You can see on the two right columns that there aren't any poors on Lowry or West Broadway. Both of these would have been good routes for LRT. West Broadway just stands out a little bit higher. We also looked at when broke up Crystal and Robbinsdale, and you see that each of those has excellent and good ratings for the various goals as well. We know that everyone is not in full agreement with these ratings. That is not unusual. That's not unexpected. People will have many different beliefs and ideas and understandings. We moved some of these around. These are a little different than they were in the draft report. We did take a lot of feedback. Some of it we incorporated it, some of it we did not, based on what we felt were the right and proper scores to give to these pieces. So in summary, we are recommending a route that we believe can be built, that we believe will best serve the communities, that we believe will provide the best opportunities for both economic growth and a transit and transportation alternative in this corridor. So some of the other things that we did, that we looked at, that we'll touch on a little bit was, we looked at, these are some changes that we've had from the draft report. So we took a real close look at walk sheds and how people would walk to stations. And one of the things we found is there's a lot of barriers based on I-94 if we had the route on the east side of 94. In other words, up north and south along Washington Avenue. one of the most challenging pieces that we thought there was about a Lowry route was, how do you get there on a north-south street? Penn is really not good. Emerson Fremont is not good. We looked, of course, at taking Lyndale all the way up, which would have eliminated this barrier, but Lyndale, as Felicia knows well, north of West Broadway is not wide and would have required a tremendous amount of right-of-way acquisition and residential property acquisition. And so Washington is the best way to move north-south, and why Washington has its positives for the things it can do on the west side, or sorry, on the east side of I-94. You can see that kind of shaded out area where that would be folks that would have a much more difficult, just there's only so many places you can cross 94, and that entire kind of residential chunk on the west side would have had a much tougher time getting to stations on Washington Avenue. If you see the next slide, you'll see that really going up West Broadway incorporates all the way to the blue, the kind of light blue, is a 15-minute walk. And so you can see it really encompasses most of downtown and on one side, and then most of North Minneapolis and South Robbinsdale residential properties within a 15-minute walk to the station areas. So that again was one of the ideas. Destinations was also a key point, and when we looked at destinations, certainly Lowry had a lot of destinations identified, and these destinations range all the way from small businesses to cultural and educational and healthcare pieces. But you see again, coming right up through what we would consider the heart of North Minneapolis, just serves more destinations, and again kind of tips West Broadway over the line. So those were a couple of things that we did. So in summary, that's where we are now. And so it's like, well, okay, so we spent this much time. Are we ready to go to construction? And of course, the answer to that is unfortunately no, or fortunately no, depending on your viewpoint. We've just kind of gotten to the point now where we can do our environmental assessment. Now, we're not starting at square zero in this particular case. We already did a draft and final environmental impact statement for the project, as well as received a record of decision for the environmental. But we've got a lot of new segments of the corridor. I mean, essentially everything in Minneapolis is new. Essentially everything in Robbinsdale is new. And while in Crystal, it's a smaller shift from the railroad alignment to the roadway alignment, it still has different impacts and needs different mitigation measures. So whereas before we were on BNSF, the BNSF alignment, I'm going to use Robbinsdale for example, and so we were in the backyards of many residential properties along the BNSF alignment. We had noise walls that were part of the project. As a result of that environmental impact, now if we're on Highway 81, we'll have different environmental measures and different mitigation solutions to put in place, both for traffic and noise and air and right-of-way impacts and all of those kind of things. And so that's the work that we'll be undertaking over the next year and a half. While we're doing that, though, we'll also be doing several other things. We'll be doing our environmental review. We'll be advancing the engineering. And so we're able to look at what are the engineering impacts, what roadways are we going to do, how are we going to impact utilities, which utilities are we going to look at, what are we going to reconstruct in there. We'll also be doing station area planning. So we'll also be looking at what are the opportunities and issues associated with land use and economic development around the station areas, and how can we meld all of those pieces, both the environmental work, the engineering work, and the land use and station area planning work, to get out the best result on all of those sides. So that work will be taking place beginning later this summer. That'll take us through and that'll put us on track for a municipal consent review and approval of the route and the design. Really, at municipal consent, we're not approving the route, we're approving the design. That'll probably be around a year from now. And then we will move into final design in the construction. And our goal is to open this project in 2028, which, while I realize is still 6 years from now, is a lot, will move a lot quicker than we think. So, Sophia, that's the basics of the route recommendation. I think at this point you want to hear from the committee, take any questions, comments. I hate it. I love it. I'm whatever else people may want to provide.
Yeah, I'll stop sharing for a sec so that we can focus on discussion for a little bit, and kind of the questions on the table and how we've helped the general public kind of think of how to give us comments is: do you agree with the recommendation? Why or why not? What do you want our elected leaders to know as we go through this process? And then what else should we be doing to basically make this project better in the next stage ahead of us? So you'll have your committee chair at the CMC this month, giving the kind of the overview of the committee report, as well as in June when the CMC will kind of have the decision before them to step forward with and recommend to the Hennepin County and Met Council. So Felicia, I'll turn it over to you to kind of lead the discussion and get people talking. I think we've had 2 more committee members join. Second John, or whoever's first John, second John, and one other person, I think. And just would be nice to hear from everybody if they're willing.
Yes, thank you, Sophia. And Dan, thank you so much for giving an overview of the report. I saw that it is 100, and the full report was 147 pages or something like that.
I think it's 115.
115. Let me not add too many pages.
And with plus appendices, so probably you're up to 145 with all of that.
Gotcha. And I'm kind of saying that out loud for those who might be watching the live stream, folks out in community. It's a very long report. I know on Met Council's page, you all have like an executive summary that kind of summarizes a lot of this stuff. But I'll kick it off by first kind of acknowledging the need, very huge need for robust, ongoing, not pausing at any point type of engagement with the impacted communities. I know that there has been engagement work. I was part of the cohort last year, and amazing work did happen, and we need like more. If we could do that times 10 over the next few years, I'll feel a lot more comfortable about patting ourselves on the back around engagement. So if you could type those questions again, Sophia, like what do you think about the route? Those questions you said you kind of framed for the public, just to kind of help us guide our conversation too about how we're responding to this. So a few key things that, first I'll start with things that I like. I like that this has been like an ongoing process in which a lot of us on here have been involved. And I really appreciate the way that the project team has taken in feedback and insight from folks at all levels in all spaces, and really put together what I think is a comprehensive report. So I appreciate all the information, but back to the engagement, it's going to be really vital that we make this digestible for the greater public so that there's a clear understanding as they're responding and commenting, that there's a clear understanding. So I appreciate that you've already started planning some of those community meetings so that folks can engage with you all and folks, I'm assuming maybe in the engagement cohort around this information and being able to process and digest it. A few areas of concern for me are when I hear that the route down 21st is an option, I'm super concerned. I live on that street, and I have not, the only way I've ever heard about this is through me being in these meetings. My neighbors have no idea that there could potentially be a light rail impacting us in that way. And so I am at very high risk right now of being displaced. So I'm gonna do my best to like keep it broad, but as somebody who like lives right here, this is what we all have to like really understand, like how it impacts those of us who might not be so close to it all. So the engagement piece again is super important. I'm really interested in hearing how the anti-displacement work group, that work has been aligned with this, because I think the timing of this report is not aligned with the timing of the work, the anti-displacement work group. I would have preferred to have some sort of recommendations from them. So that would have meant that they would need to see this beforehand, be able to process through some things and make recommendations. So as soon as possible, I'd really like to see the anti-displacement work group work through this and offer up recommendations. Things that I feel are missing are like recommendations around how do we prevent displacement on a place like West Broadway. We've been talking about this a lot. The concern is raised in in a lot of the public comments. And I haven't really heard anything that was solution-based. So I wasn't clear on really an appropriate space to be like, hey, I know a few strategies that could possibly work. For instance, right, on West Broadway, a lot of these Black and BIPOC business owners, they don't necessarily own the property. And if we're moving into this phase around municipal consent and really engaging with the property owners, you're not necessarily engaging with the business owners. And so that's a really clear distinction in a community like that. And I don't know if it's the same in other areas, but particularly in North Minneapolis, that is a huge challenge. And it's not a new one to us. We know that there's a lot of things systematically that have happened to prevent Black folks and other BIPOC folks, Indigenous folks from being able to have access to be able to acquire these properties. And I think it's going to be super important for the project team, the anti-displacement work group, to be engaging with organizations like Partnership in Property Commercial Land Trust on what it might look like for an org like this to buy and hold the land at a time where I can't say with confidence that, say, all of those Black businesses from the Capri down to Penn are in a position to go ahead and buy that building so that they can have a stake in what's happening in their community. And so there are options out there. There are models that lead to, like, this particularly is a shared ownership model, but these things really need to be explored ASAP so that we can position communities like North Minneapolis to actually win, because things coming out like this are already affecting the price of things. Properties are being sold off, and it's not necessarily to individuals, business owners, and community members. And these are like really tangible ways that we get displaced. We don't have a say. We don't have a say. Without having a say in what businesses come there and who's owning the things, it becomes really difficult for us to believe that we can imagine like our community. And we don't want to have happen to the rest of North Minneapolis what happened to Harrison, where as soon as it was announced, rent prices go up, property taxes go up, and people's income are not matching that increase. So I think it's going to be important to really form strategic partnerships in order to like really look out for these businesses. There's a lot of opportunity, particularly on West Broadway in North Minneapolis, when we're looking at what's happening with vacant properties. Pardon me? Sorry. When we're looking at what's happening with vacant properties. And so putting some policies and things in place, if we're moving into this phase of we need to be engaging with the city of Minneapolis, I think it's going to be super important that the city officials who are going to be voting on this and making some decisions around that are really connected to what that engagement feedback and whatnot is looking like. Lastly, I wanted to ask if, what was the other question? Oh, to achieve something that looks equitable or even reparative in a community like North Minneapolis, there's like a lot of catching up, right? If you all start telling the community that this is going to bring jobs, I would challenge you to identify like who in the community is ready to have those jobs and what took place prior to this to prepare folks so that they could have access to those jobs. If the jobs are going to people outside of the community, it's completely extractive. So we want to find ways that we repair that harm that's been done. That's Harrison Neighborhood Association. That's the historic divestment on a corridor like West Broadway. And really making sure that the folks have been negatively impacted by all of that are taken care of now and caught up to all of this now. That's with information, that's with resources, that's with ownership and the ability to acquire property, and the Met Council not just raising funds for to build this thing, but also pulling in those funds so that community has access to get what they need to be prepared to stay and to thrive on the other side of this. I'll leave it at that for now because I wanted to offer up a few things for folks to also be processing as we move into this discussion today. Really interested in hearing, folks who have businesses on these corridors speak up today and what your thoughts are on this report.
I mean, I'll go first. More. Can you hear me?
Your audio is a little bit choppy, KB. Go ahead.
Is that better? Yeah. I'll just type it in the chat.
We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. As a business owner on the corridor, once I found out, not only as a business owner, but as a business owner and a member of the Anti-Displacement Committee, I was kind of shocked to find out that a decision had already been made about the route without any feedback on how businesses and community members are going to be able to have any type of ownership on the corridor as was expressed at the beginning. So that is a concern of mine, that business owners, like Felicia said, business owners will be displaced. And I believe that was the entire purpose of the Anti-Displacement Committee, and I feel like it was just ignored. So I would like to see some because from the gate, my very first comment from the moment I found out about the blue line was, how are the businesses going to survive the building process? The minority businesses, how are they going to survive the building process? I still have not heard how that's going to happen. So I echo Felicia in how are we going to obtain ownership of the numerous amounts of city and county owned properties, and how are the businesses, the BIPOC businesses, going to survive this entire process from the moment of the announcement to the moment that the blue line is actually up and going.
Thank you for that, KB. And I know you're really familiar with the work that the Anti-Displacement Working Group's doing right now. We'll kind of give a little bit about that process next, but just also want to insert that while we don't have a full construction support program in place for the construction of the line itself, we know and are committed to developing that both through the recommendations of the working group and through our collective efforts within our agencies. So there's the construction piece, and then there's the ongoing piece, and the pieces about ownership and land and all that kind of stuff. We're really looking forward to seeing the strategies that the anti-displacement working group recommends for that in particular, because I think our governments want to do it right, and we needed a process to really get that genuine community input to shape those recommendations and make sure we were hitting the mark in terms of all of the things that both you and Felicia have brought up. So don't want to stop the discussion of committee, but just also really wanted to add that to the discussion. Sometimes we don't have all the details yet, but we have a commitment to the process, and definitely some of the deliverables within that process. And Felicia, I'll turn it back to you, but also just want to acknowledge that Mr. Opat, Mike put some comments in the chat about North Memorial and what they would hope to see with that, and things that they want from the project regarding design.
Yes, thank you so much. Did anyone else have any responses to those questions that were kind of posed, or any other comments, any other things that we need to be thinking about? Anything you want to amplify or lift up, things you've been hearing that haven't been raised in this space?
I'll just sort of drop my 2 cents. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so first, thank you guys for all the work that you guys are doing on this project. I know that it is a heavy lift, and there's no right answer, or perfect answer, I should say. And so yeah, my comments stem from, having spaces both on the Lowry corridor and on the West Broadway corridor. And I want to echo Felicia's comment around the 21st Street option. I know that earlier in the conversations, 21st was an option, but it seemed like it was economically not viable nor viable for pedestrians. And as a business, as a person who owns a 25-unit apartment complex that houses 25 Black families on the north side, the option to go down 21st, there's pushback from a personal perspective. And like Felicia said, I've always been a proponent of what's best for the community. So if it's best to go down 21st, and I'll humbly oblige. But I just struggle getting there when I look at the different options, to know that it's still even an option, given the complexity to go down 21st. So that's a sort of red flag for me, if you will. Also, too, just to touch on another point Felicia brought up, for me, as a person who lives in this community and runs their business and is anchored down in this community, I'm mostly concerned about the displacement of others who are not on this call. I think the folks on this call will weather the storm just fine. But I'm not on this call for myself. I'm on this call for my neighbors who don't have time to sit on these calls and advocating on their behalf. And so I know that the largest concern for the community is, again, displacement. And I think it's amiss to not share out this information with the information from the anti-displacement work group. I would have preferred leading with the anti-displacement work group information, and having that sort of intertwined with the recommendation. But it's neither here nor there. I think it's water under the bridge. I think we can course correct and get there to loop them into these conversations. And this is my last thought. I think the biggest piece here is going to be, I don't know, my biggest concern for every business that we don't have a business on West Broadway. We have an apartment building, but I'm really concerned about my friends like Kenya and other folks who have for-profit businesses on the corridor, and sort of what the plan is to make sure that when their businesses are disrupted from construction, sort of what the plan is going to be, because I've literally seen businesses go out of business because of road construction happening for 6 months in front of their business. And so I'm just largely concerned about that as well. All of these are, challenges and questions that I think we can figure out the answers to. So I'm excited to continue the conversations.
Thank you, Chris. And then Kenya, you were up next.
Okay, good morning. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather, so may sound a little harsh here. Good morning and thank you. So I might sound a little opposite than most of my colleagues on here, but I'm actually very, very excited about the future of the North Side, the North region, Northwest region, and I'm happy that Broadway was actually the route chosen. It was always of interest to me. I think it offers the greatest economic opportunity to the North Side, although it will, cause some pain. There'll be some pain there, but that's part of, how it works, I guess. And I'm very, very much interested in being engaged continuously around the mitigation of how to minimize the negative impact and displacement. Although I am a commercial property owner and a business owner on the corridor, housing currently 11 businesses, but about time this redevelopment happens, I'll be housing about 27 businesses on the corridor. So for me, I think one, yes, I support the recommendation and hopefully for those reasons. And like I said, I've worked on the Botno Blue Line at that time since 2009. So this is for me been a very long process, and I hope that what we're hearing today is also kind of packaged as a continuation of community work and effort that's been put into this project for years. It didn't just start, and I hope that it doesn't and isn't presented as such, because then that minimizes all the work like people like me and others have put in for years in establishing Black people being leaders in transportation, me being the first to be appointed to the tab board, and others, who play in this economic game, which is important and shouldn't be undercut. We've done a lot of work and we put in a lot of insight over the years around what's now called anti-displacement, but was simply just our perspectives as people living and working in this community that I think should be, as part of the considerations of what the city and any level of government from the county to Met Council and the federal government considers as part of how you make investments in building up the north side beyond just building the actual route itself. So using language is important. We know that this is also a very environmental justice communities is the terminology, right? The federal language used to describe communities like Northside that helps secure resources for the redevelopment there that I hope is infused now and throughout how we're thinking about the benefits of the community on the upside of things. I will say that at least 29 of 30 African Americans actually own commercial property on West Broadway. We actually do hold the majority of the businesses within the facilities we own. So talking to us as actual landowners and business owners is talking to community also. It's important. We're not we shouldn't be taken as just the voice, but we're important. Most of us grew up here, and we're there owning property because we care. And we're trying to be a part of redeveloping the future of our community. So the perspectives of who we are and what we are, I think has to be balanced with those of us who actually are business leaders and owners in the community as well. We have perspective, we're there, we're investing, we're putting our money up. We live there, we have families there, and we're part of the game, even though we don't have as much time to be here. I couldn't be here most of the meetings. I'm running 2 businesses and starting a redevelopment project. But I just want to make sure that it's clear that we are there. And you should be intentionally engage us and not just the social, political organizations within our communities who oftentimes don't have the same perspectives that we hold as business owners and leaders. Not that one is better than the other, but they are different sometimes. And we do need to be engaged. Northside is greatly, in my opinion, the narrative of who we are and what we are is led from a social service perspective or political that doesn't always represent the economic interests and realities of those of us in the business and economic sector. So we're a minority in the narrative and we need to be more prioritized. That's my personal opinion and perspective from someone who's worked in this field for over 20 years. It does us a disservice. So I think for me, I'm also not a supporter of the 21st Avenue route, although I understand the importance of why it emerged. Anytime something comes on the back end that isn't front ended by the community, I think might cause problems. So I have now residential property along the 21st Avenue. Also, that would be concerning to me for the many of people will be displaced. So that's really, I'm just want to just be very honest and throw my raw thoughts out there of what I feel about, just the whole economic piece because, and I'll stop and say because, we all have perspectives that I respect and that's important. But I also just want to recognize that we have to make sure more business owners and property owners, since we have the largest percentage of people of color who own commercial property on the corridors on the north side, we have to make sure that we're involved in these conversations and helping to lead and shape the narrative. That's really important. So that's really it. I think as far as the other questions, what else that should people know? They should know that we're not all poor, that we do own things, and that we have a vision for our economic future on the north side. And we have a lot of projects happening right now. And yes, we want to early on have a mitigation plan in place or ideas around how to make us whole. I certainly want to make sure every business owner, including me on my project and others, are fully compensated during any downtime, but how much of my property will be taken. How do we need to, think about our development for those of us who are just starting and those who have ideas in the future. That's it. Thank you.
Chair, could I have to go to another meeting, but I just want to add one thing before I go, if that's okay?
Yes, go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. So I really appreciate the comments I've heard today so far, and I will get an update on the others as you guys finish your meeting. I just wanted to make sure that as I leave, I talked about the engineering work going forth and the environmental work going forth and the station area planning going forth. But I did fail to mention, and Cathy will talk about this in a little bit, the anti-displacement work that the county and Met Council has set in motion on this particular Blue Line Extension project is an essential, critical, and part of the Blue Line Extension project, like all of those other pieces. And this is a first for us at Hennepin County and Met Council. I've worked on numerous other LRT lines in the region, and so I know there's been a lot of discussion about should it have been done first? Is it too far behind? Is it too far in front? Are we just at the right time? We're attempting to make sure that displacement and impacts to properties and businesses and residential properties are all part of the discussion as we move this project forward for the next number of years. And so many of the things that I've heard are about the criticality of that, and we agree. We agree as a project team about the importance of those factors as it relates to advancing this project, and we are committed to seeing that be part of the discussion along every step. And so we're excited to work on that piece. Cathy's going to talk a little bit about some of the next steps on that. I just wanted folks to know that is key in what we're doing as well. So thanks, everybody. I have to go to another meeting, but I really appreciate everybody's comments.
Thank you so much, Dan. Other thoughts or even questions for the project team?
Folks that we haven't heard from, even if you're Brooklyn Park, right? This line is about connecting communities. So if you have thoughts as well, or folks in some of our other cities, feel free to jump in as well. Definitely want you part of the discussion.
Sophia, Felicia, this is Tim Baylor. How are you guys this morning?
Good to hear from you, Tim.
My question is regarding the process going forward. First of all, I must admit that I was surprised that this announcement was made. Given that, hadn't had a regular meeting, I guess we skipped a meeting, and I was surprised by that. But my question is regarding the process moving forward. So this is staff recommendation for the route, and as I understand it, and so this moves forward how to formal approval. Who gets to vote on it? When does that vote, when do you propose that vote happens? I know that some time ago, when we first started this process, I questioned who was going to be involved with the vote, what municipalities, what government agencies. I didn't get a clear response on that, and I just wanted to make sure that I do understand that process and that there is parity in the vote as it is ratified or denied or
Yep.
adjusted.
Yep.
Can you elaborate on that?
Sure thing, Tim. So yes, you said that correctly. This is the staff recommendation that is included in this report that got released yesterday. We have a 30-day comment period for this report, and so that's for everybody to kind of weigh in on the recommendation and our analysis to get to that recommendation. And then we will put together basically, if you remember the meeting where we went through how we kind of categorize the comments on the draft report. So we'll do a similar exercise where we basically look for themes in the comments as well as how they relate to the project goals and how they would influence the project goals. And we'll summarize that and basically put together a staff memo asking kind of for that official step forward post the end of the 30-day comment period. That will all come back to you all. So we'll come to the BAC, CAC, and basically the conversation that we're having today, we'll kind of summarize that into some very succinct pieces that you want Felicia to carry on to the corridor management committee. So this discussion is really helpful today because we're starting to hit the high points that will then reflect in the notes and kind of have for you at your next meeting. Is there anything that's missing, anything else that needs to get kind of forward? So at the June kind of committee meetings, that will be that step forward. So the BAC, CAC will kind of come with the answering those questions that we kind of just posed in chat. And then CMC will be taking an action to recommend to the Met Council and Hennepin County the pathway forward. And for those that are maybe not as close to the project, the CMC is made up of the elected officials from each municipality. So from all the cities, Mayor Fry is the main representative for Minneapolis, and then he has alternates as well that can vote if he is not present. And as well as the Met Council, Hennepin County, the Metropolitan Airports Commission, MnDOT, and then we have a couple of equity voices on the committee as well, that a couple votes. And then basically the Hennepin County and Met Council will both receive the recommendations from the Corridor Management Committee and make the official decision to move this project forward. Like Dan teed up in his presentation, this is not the final municipal approval for the alignment itself. We will seek municipal consent when we're a little bit further in the process itself, and that is the official legal process in which the cities basically vote on the route itself. That will happen probably in 2023. We need to do more environmental and design work to get to that specific piece, because when you seek municipal consent, you have to actually have the exact alignment of your LRT, if there's any places that are elevated or at grade. All those details need to kind of be figured out. You need that package of things. So this is the first step in kind of a multi-step process. And the environmental process is also, we're a proposed project until we clear our environmental, right? This is all proposed until we get through that process. So not only do we have the municipal consent process in front of us, we also have our environmental process in front of us. And many of the things that folks were talking about here in terms of like mitigation, reducing impact, and making sure that you don't have disproportionate impact on BIPOC communities or other sensitive communities, or it's all part of that process that we have to kind of do thoroughly. And to Felicia's point, those processes also give us the opportunity to do even better engagement and continue to refine what we've heard and make sure that we've done it. Like, an example of that is we did a little bit of door knocking, but we heard from folks like, no, you really need to do door knocking. Like, that is expected of the project team. And so, an example of that is that's part of our outreach plan during this comment period, right, is to do a lot of door knocking. And so, and as well as utilizing the cohort. So, we will continue to think about ways to do things the best way for community. And we have a few very official processes to go through, but this selecting our route gives us the power to kind of focus in on solutions and kind of getting into those details and whatnot. And we'll go through a little bit more of where the anti-displacement working group is in a second. That's also kind of a parallel process of where it's cities and things will start taking recommendations and implementing them as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Not really. So what I heard you say was the Met Council in Hennepin County will make the final decision on the route and moving forward.
Yes, to select the route recommendation, that'll be a decision of Hennepin County Met Council. But you also intimated that there's other municipalities like the city of Minneapolis and the mayor who will have a vote. Who do they submit their votes to? Both of the entities, Hennepin County and Met Council? Do other cities along the route have a vote? So
if so, who are they?
Yeah, two places where municipalities are weighing in. One, they sit on our corridor management committee, and that will make recommendations to those bodies. So the CMC, City of Minneapolis, Robbinsdale, Crystal, Brooklyn Park, as well as Golden Valley, because they were part of the previous alignment. We have non-voting members on the CMC as well that represent neighboring cities that have interest. So there's this step of selecting our route, but then there's also the process of seeking municipal consent. And that is when we do go to each municipality and ask for their full body to vote on the project itself. So it's with this project, remember there's multiple decision points as we get through this process, and multiple places where we kind of are asking overall, are we on the right track? Are we hitting the mark? Are there big things that we still need to figure out? And so selecting this route is one of them, but then we do need to go back to our municipalities to have them approve the design, basically within about a year.
So does each municipality have one vote?
Yes, I guess in a sense they vote as a body. Yeah.
So Brooklyn Center has the same amount of votes as Minneapolis.
we do not seek municipal consent from Brooklyn Center because the route doesn't go through the city. But on the CMC, they both have a representative.
Would it be possible to get a list of all of those entities, agencies, and municipalities that are going to vote, and just so that I can kind of quantify where the votes are coming from and how that's going to be disseminated between Met Council and Hennepin County? I just want to be clear on the process for approval.
Sure, I can put a link to the kind of CMC charter and roster. And then municipal consent is basically any county or city which the line goes through. So Hennepin County and your 4 corridor cities, which is Minneapolis, Robbinsdale, Crystal, and Brooklyn Park.
I'd appreciate that, Sophia. Thank you.
So Trevor already put the link for you in chat.
Okay.
Tim, did that get to what you're looking for?
Yes. Thank you.
And I'd also offer, you have a couple City of Minneapolis staff listening in today. I think both Jim Vole, Becca, and Amber Turnquist are all here from the city listening in to connect with City of Minneapolis folks as well.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Tim, for those questions. I'm doing a quick time check, and we do want to allow some time for the anti-displacement update. I see one other hand, I think. Kenya, do you have a question or comment?
I do. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Felicia. Sorry. Sophia, is there a document that outlines the remaining of the process for the cities and Met Council, just what that process looks like?
Yes, we that last next step slide that I just had up and I can pull up in a second had kind of some of the big buckets of things that happen next. We also have a next step document that we can share. I think we'll have it posted online, but we can also share specifically with this committee. I'll have it might have been, I'm trying to remember if I actually sent it already. But anyway, I'll have Panu afterwards make sure this whole committee has the next step, and I'll just actually pull up the screen really
Yeah,
quick
Kenya,
right now.
I think if you were able to go back to the email from this that had like the information, there was an executive summary, and on the last page of that, it has that page with all the next steps. I think it actually maybe even a little bit more detail in the executive summary, and you can find that also on Met Council's page.
So does that lay out like the CMC vote, the county vote, the city vote, Met Council vote? Does that document lay all those processes out?
We have a specific like next step 2-pager that we will send out to the committee that has some of all of that specifics.
And just one question about in that, I mean, I'm familiar with the process, but the question I have is, at any point during that, community folks have the ability to weigh in. And so just making sure that part is clear, right? As part of how they can sway the vote or not. So it's not like a one and done thing, right? It's there's opportunity for folks to weigh in. So just making sure that was clear.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kenya. I think it's really important for this committee to know that there are very big milestones ahead of us. The community has a lot of say. So just to kind of tee it up, I'll just do a very high level version. As one, in our environmental review documents, there's both official comment periods as well as public hearings, and the requirement. Not to say the requirement, because we want to go above and beyond requirements in terms of community engagement, but the expectation of very robust community engagement through the environmental documentation to really find that mitigation and to minimize impacts. Same with municipal consent. There's an official process with that, and to weigh in through that. Through the engineering process, we'll check in a whole bunch. Stationary planning will have its own process. And what's teeing up next with the anti-displacement group, Kira, not only is there the working group, but Kira will be doing broader community engagement as well to specifically talk about the pieces that they're developing with the working group. So it feels like a very official step, right? We're at a very official step, but it is really, we're at the beginning of a process versus the end. And in some ways, that for those of you like you, Cathy, that have been on this for a very, very long time, it kind of feels like forever. And I know also that for some folks, this feels very new. So we have a lot of process in places, I think multiple people, some folks know about this super a lot, and others not as much. And this whole time frame is to develop more of those details. Chair Felicia, any other comments, or should we kind of jump into a little bit of an anti-displacement update?
Yes, I'd love for us to go ahead and transition into the anti-displacement update, and encourage folks, if after you've processed this for a while, to make sure you still send your comments in, and encourage folks in your communities to do the same.
Okay.
Was Cathy going to give the update today?
I was going to do it for Cathy, but she's here for questions. And we made the call that just given time, instead of bouncing around between us a bunch, that helps out. So she's here to hear and know all the things, and I'll just give the quick update. That's cool with everybody? Cool. So, you know, there's been a lot of conversation about the timing of the anti-displacement working group. And we know that they're beginning to kind of do their things. While we're at this milestone, just kind of also wanted to check in with the community, this committee in particular, about the process of how we've gotten to where we are, partly because this group, this body here, as well as our CAC and the cohort, really shaped the work that we're doing in the anti-displacement working group. You know, if we go back to when we pivoted the project, we knew that we needed to do better than we had done for previous alignments, but it was the community and the feedback that you all gave us that is making sure that those pieces are done earlier than we've ever done before. And you know, we have a very committed Met Council, as well as a very committed Hennepin County Board to do this work. And so you all helped us build the table. So, you know, there was this whole process that we entered into this year to build the table, and really in conversations that we had here, that this first kind of bullet, implementable recommendations. So very much to Felicia's point, right? Like, there is a ton of expertise in the community about things that should happen and are desired. And we want to make sure that those things can be put into place. And so that was, you know, a really big tenet that this group highlighted and brought out for us as we started to think about how we build this anti-displacement table. And we knew really early in the beginning that it was, even based on, you know, again, based on discussions, that it had to be a third-party facilitator. That the solution didn't rest just at the Met Council. It didn't just rest at just Hennepin County. It didn't just rest at the city of Minneapolis. It was going to need to be in a multi-jurisdictional effort to do things the best that we may have ever seen in our region. And, you know, connected to our advisory committees and having a strong work plan so people knew what to expect from the process going forward. I want to really highlight and thank all of you, because you helped us develop that RFP that we went to solicit from Cura, right? So we heard from you all that having a local expert, somebody that knew what was going on within community and many of the organizations that you represent that were connected to that. Not only did you all review the RFP, but we had volunteers, and got to do a shout out for Felicia for even interviewing the members that sat at the working table. So it was a collective effort to get this started, and I hope that you all see your fingerprints on the development of the anti-displacement working group. So because of all of your efforts, we have Kira selected and doing good work. You all helped us shape what that table will look like, and now we have a group that represents government, community, nonprofits, those that are potentially at risk of displacement, as well as the philanthropic organizations that could potentially bring the dollars. The Kira group is really listening to what folks are saying, and like, for example, there's been a big interest in federal dollars, right? So they're exploring how that could be further leveraged into community to do even more good work and do the things that community wants to see throughout the development of LRT. And hopefully the working group itself, right? We have everybody at the table, so those tensions and those difficulties can kind of be hashed out throughout the process, and just kind of taking a deeper dive. What we're, I think, really hoping from the process is, you can Met Council or Hennepin County could be like, oh yeah, we can just do this, right? So that's not the point. It's really centering the community's work in this process, and kind of really coalescing around big, bold strategies to do big things. So the group is just kind of starting to do that. They've met twice. KB, as I think he's still on the call, sits on that group, as well as many others that are familiar names within the community, and in kind of the late May or early June, we'll start to see some of that kind of norming and storming around recommendations and things start to really happen. The overall schedule of kind of September and October focusing on housing, and then business in particular, and an overall set of recommendations. Doesn't mean that the project team is waiting for the very end to get things going. Like, I think the support during construction, right? That was brought out multiple times during our discussion today. Like, we are already thinking about how to do a robust construction support program. We are committed to that. But the anti-displacement group might give us even more strategies and ideas of how to make that program very specific for the community needs. So, kind of it doesn't all have to wait till the end, but kind of that iterative process to really build things up. And there's probably within this process the need for many partnerships, and those will also take time to form. But we have time before construction. And our environmental work will also help inform it, and all these kind of things can kind of continue to kind of come together. Right? They're kind of, in a sense, a little bit separate efforts, but why we report on all of them is they also need to do this, right? The station area planning might have, they're like Venn diagrams, right? They'll have these kind of intersecting things that inform each other. And with that, right, the work of, there's also a big need for community engagement within the process, and the Kira team has been talking a lot with the working group already on those strategies and on that plan, to not only get the buy-in and feedback from the diverse perspectives of the working group, but the community at large. And so took some time to get this going, but because of this process over this last 18 months, you all helped us get here. So just want to acknowledge that, and know that we don't have all the details at this moment, but they are coming, and we have very strong support from all of the municipal partners, as well as the Hennepin County Met Council in seeing this through. So more to come, and we'll continue to bring back what the working group is talking about to this committee as well. And pause for any questions, and Cathy's here to answer them probably better than I will, but just want to take a few minutes before we close on kind of next steps.
I see Kenya has a question in the chat about what does the engagement process look like, and are there any commercial property owners on the committee? The engagement process is going to be twofold. So the project team will be doing our own engagement around project-specific pieces, and then the anti-displacement work group is really going to get specific about engaging around the work that they're doing. Now we are aligning our work. So for instance, we met with C. Terrence yesterday. He has the report, sharing that with his team. I listen in on some of their planning effort meetings so that we can make sure that we're sharing where we're at and how we can collaborate and how we would engage folks, so that we're not stepping on each other's toes per se. We're working on independent things, but we want to make sure that we both understand the information that we're receiving so we both can benefit from that. I hope that makes sense. And then, are there any commercial property owners on the committee? I'm not familiar. You know, that question I'm not sure about. Maybe Felicia, you know, you're more acquainted with which members have commercial ownership along the corridor.
We can follow up too, maybe with the roster for this committee of the anti-displacement working group. That might be a good way to respond to that as well.
So just to clarify, yeah, if you will, that'd be important because that's equitable representation, right? For me, and I don't want a group of people making decisions or recommendations about what they think is best if they haven't talked to folks who actually, you know, are also own property on the corridor. I think that's important. How my properties might be affected based on what they see as anti-gentrification. I don't even know what that word means in the context of this. So there's a lot of questions I have, but certainly want to know how to be engaged or connected to the narratives, content that come out of this group. I respect the work, but I also am concerned about what the narrative means and how that might affect development and the future of just the economy there. So I don't know. We may not have the same understanding of that, but I do want to know. So
Kenya, I put a link in the chat. We have a page on the anti-displacement work group on this site. So it's more of like community-faced kind of website for comments. The two meetings thus far that the anti-displacement work group were recorded. And so those are viewable on this website if you have interest in hearing the discussion.
thank you. But everyday people, we don't have time to keep up with this stuff. I just want to put that out there. So like I got a billion things going on, so I'm not watching every single thing you do. But it would be helpful to know how this moves along and where we can insert perspective around decisions and narrative. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we will continue to build out that site in a very kind of short but very, very precise understanding of what comes out of those work group meetings, so that we are being transparent and that people are being informed about the process. Thank you for your input.
Yeah, we'll keep bringing that information back to this group, our committees, as well as pushing out newsletters and things like that with that, you know, point of like summary material of things that are happening. I think I saw KB. He's on the committee as well, so there is overlap between the working group and this body as well. I think he dropped off. I see everybody's starting to drop off. We're at time. So what we're kind of thinking right now is we would cancel the May meeting unless this body thinks that there's benefit in just getting together to spend time crafting the recommendation. But otherwise, our June meeting will just be about a little review of the comments that we received through the process and taking the notes that we started to develop from this conversation and turning it into kind of like a statement in a sense from this body. If that sounds good to folks.
Sophia, I would only add maybe the June's agenda, an update from the anti-displacement work group, since they will be meeting